Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Rebecca Troy, owner and founder of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain, and today we are thrilled to have yet another one of our client review case studies. So today we are going to be sharing with you the information from our client, Jarvis. He's now 10, but at the time he went through the program, he was a 9-year-old boy who in just 4.5 months made statistically significant progress in all areas that we tested him in. So that would be phonological awareness, reading, and spelling. And they were able to do this right from the comfort of their own home, which was also halfway across the world. So we'll talk about this in this study, but Fiona and Jarvis are actually living in Australia, and they were able to complete the program from halfway across the world. So I think that's super awesome. So Jarvis, in the 4.5 months, jumped from being 80% accurate to 99.9% accurate in his phonological awareness. His reading scores on the wide range achievement test 5 went from the 96th percentile to the 99.9th percentile, and his reading went from the 14th percentile to the 58th in spelling, with nearly every incorrect attempt using what we call a good phonetic equivalent. And so his mom said, gosh, at the end of the day, what you want is a result that is sustainable, something that you can follow step by step, and that's exactly what they were able to get here. So I want to just make sure that you understand a little bit more about what we're really talking about. So when clients are working with us, these are tools that we give to families so that they can do them right from their own home. And so it is very common, like in Fiona's case, she's living in Australia and they did not have access to any kind of dyslexia support in her area at all. And so it was serendipitous that she was able to connect through us, and we were able to support her right from the comfort of their own home. So everything that we are about to discuss happened in their home for 10 to 15 minutes a day for a 4.5-month interval. So I think that's just kind of helpful to have for context. And also, as we start these reviews, I really do think that it's so important for you as a parent to understand what dyslexia actually looks like. So what you have in front of you is an fMRI scan of 2 brains. So up at the front here would be like the nose and the eyes. But what you see is a non-dyslexic person on the left and a person with dyslexia on the right. And this is specifically during a language task. So if you were to have these 2 people side by side and they were doing anything else, we would not notice a significant difference in what their brain was performing like. But when you ask these 2 people to spell something or read something or, write this paragraph, whatever that might be that relates to language, there are very significant differences in how the brain is actually performing. So what you'll see over here on the left is the person without dyslexia has activity in this area in the back of the brain that we call the occipital lobe, and that's where your vision is controlled. So when you compare that to the person with dyslexia, you'll notice that there literally is not activity in the back area. So one of the things that we think that can be just so challenging is when kids believe that this is somehow related to them or their effort. Kim, I'm going to just have you mute there for a second. There we go. Go back to, thank you very much. All right, so, let me just make sure that I've got the right screen here. Can you all see my screen? This one? Okay, great. So when you have a person with dyslexia, you'll also notice that there is significantly less activity in these areas over the ears, which we call the parietal temporal lobes. So this is really where we process sound in the brain. So quite literally, there is an underdevelopment between what you see and what you hear with dyslexia, which is why when kids are trying to spell things, they might add letters that are inappropriate. They might omit letters that should have been there. They may be reading along and see a word, try really hard to decode it, and then 2 lines later, later see the exact same word and it's like amnesia, like I've never even seen that word before. It's possible that they might try to decode something multisyllabic and maybe they get the first letter or two and then they're guessing and they're just making up what comes next. And that really comes from this inactivity in the brain between letters and sounds. It's just not there. But what I think is really, really powerful is to know that you absolutely, so over here on the right is a reader that has gone through remediation. You can absolutely reorganize how the brain is functioning. So like once upon a time, we used to believe that the world is flat. We now know that the brain is not static. You absolutely can change your brain over the course of a lifetime. And it doesn't just have to be in children. As adults, we do too also have the capacity to change our brain, but it depends on what we do with it and the intensity and the repetition that is also part of that intervention. So I hope that throughout this presentation today that you are filled with hope, that there is something that you can do. You actually can help a child who has underdevelopment in these areas to create development in those areas. And so this story that we're about to share with Jarvis and Fiona is exactly one of those, and you can see how it impacted him from a human level. So Jarvis, our client, was 9 years old at the time that we started, and this was information that we got from his mom, Fiona, about what life was really like before they started working with us. So Fiona came to us with a ton of apprehension and doubt. She really, really wanted to know from us if this was going to work because they had already been on a 6 to 7 year journey before we met. So when Jarvis was 3 years old, he suddenly developed a massive stutter. It came out of nowhere. He had huge amounts of inflammation in his body and in his brain, and he couldn't speak for a few years. And so, as a mom, she's very concerned, very worried. Her background is in integrative medicine. And so she had all kinds of people who could advise her, but she said it was still a huge investment of time and energy and money and resources in all forms. And it was really heartbreaking and a difficult experience for her. So she said oftentimes they would be in a positive space where like it seemed that the intervention would have a glimmering sense of hope. And then sometimes it actually felt like things were getting worse. So, he was severely stuttering at the time. That is now perfect. Things are well, but she said they learned a lot from their mistakes in that 6 to 7 year experience. So she said there was a lot that we were making gains on, but there were really these bigger underlying issues. And during COVID, like so many of us, when learning happened at home, she totally had a different window into Jarvis's struggles that she hadn't had before. So as she was trying to get him to do homework with her, he had complete writing refusal. It was an extreme difficulty for him to get ideas onto paper. There was anxiety related to that. His spelling wasn't progressing. He had been doing OG tutoring, but nothing was really moving them along. In addition to that, he had severe digestion issues, and they had done neurofeedback for an entire year. So in that process, it was 45 minutes to an hour every single day over a year. And so she felt like they weren't seeing any results. And she said, in a lot of ways, I felt like we even regressed from that, but they stayed the course, they did the work. And so you can see, and this happens a lot for many clients, like it's not always that you land here right after you get a diagnosis. For many of our clients, they have tried so many other things, but they still don't have the result, and their child is still struggling, and there's still major, major difficulties. And that was really no different for Fiona and Jarvis. So he was reading for only 10 minutes at a time, completely refused to read fiction, but she said he's just massively creative and he would wear costumes just for fun. So he's a big thinker, he's a dreamer, but something was getting blocked for him. So, she took him back to school and she said, I was managing myself to give the teachers the benefit of the doubt, but he continued to fall further and further behind. And so he had failed his writing class. He became oppositional during homework. He could sense that the things that were being tried on him were not getting anywhere. And so mom said, gosh, what is being put forward as the solution just doesn't feel right to me. I am not aligned with this. The strategies that are being suggested don't feel like we're really getting to the crux of the issue. It feels like these are some helpful tips, but we're not really getting what we need. And so the teacher said, he's just being a bit lazy. And she said, that isn't my son. Like, that's just not right. You don't know him. And so at that time, she just felt like it was time for Mama Bear to step in. So at that time, they did move forward to get a full neuropsych assessment for him. And she said, it was me that was the driving force. It wasn't the teachers. It wasn't anybody else. Like, I was the driving force for that assessment because I just knew that he was so articulate with so many ideas. He was so intelligent. But then we had this discrepancy. Like, he was refusing to write. His spelling was atrocious. And I really needed to figure out what was going on. So at the time, she said, okay, universe, it's time. I want something that's actually going to resolve this issue. I want it to feel right. I want what we're doing to actually last forever. I want to feel supported. I need a pivotal shift. And she said, I was willing to do whatever it took for my little boy, but I needed the certainty that it was going to work. And so 3 days later, we appeared in a magazine that was titled Dyslexia Solutions. And she said, I saw it as divine intervention. And she said, well, that sounds like what I need. And she said, we had so much evidence of who we were. We had invested in a year-long neurofeedback for 45 minutes to an hour a day. We were consistent, even though we weren't seeing progress. We were committed to seeing things through, but we really needed that reassurance that this was going to work. And so she said, when I started, was I 100% certain? No. There's still that residue of here we go again, but it felt right. And so they leaned in and did the work. So, her big reason or her big why was that her son was becoming a shell of who he could be. It was like his brain was locked up, but it was important to support him from a confidence point of view. So in Australia, he was in year 4. And it's a developmental transition anyhow, but she felt like it was a really important time to support him from the confidence point of view. And so as a belief, mom didn't feel like academic results necessarily equal a full life. So it wasn't really important to her that he was getting these awesome grades, but his sense of self was really, really important. And so she said, for my husband and I, that was really critical. I went through school, she's speaking of herself, with an I've got this attitude, but my husband, who is exactly the same as Jarvis, has huge giftedness in so many ways, but he was locked in, which had deep marks on his self-esteem, and it limited my husband's opportunities. It limited his self-belief, and we both didn't want that for Jarvis. We did not want history to repeat himself. And so then we got really curious and said, like, if we overcome this, what then? So it was our opportunity to open our heart and the power within us to make a meaningful change. So she said, if I can do something about this, then let's do it. And she described motherhood, and I just thought this was so beautiful that I couldn't not include this. She said, in motherhood, there is this roar of the goddess, which is this deep sense of protection that you have over your child. And so when you're struggling, when you feel hopeless, it's just horrible because of this goddess that you have inside of you. But when you can do something about it, it feels really good. And because there was something I could do, there was this great joy within her to be able to do that for her little boy, which I thought it was so beautiful that I couldn't not share. So on the other side of this, like 4.5 months later, I asked her, like, what did this look like? What were some of your celebrations? And here's what she shared. So they live in this beautiful area where they're surrounded by rainforests. And so they spent one-on-one time after school. And so they walk and talk and they spend time out in nature, which I think is just amazing. But, after the program, they were walking and talking about the writing free time that he had had at school that day. And he said to her, like, I just loved it, Mom. I got started and I'm writing a story about a demigod and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And so her question was like, well, so how much did you write? And she said, I was kind of joking, but I was expecting that he was going to say one or two sentences. Like, I wrote 2 full paragraphs, Mom. And my friend just looked at me and said, how'd you do that? How'd you get so much out? I haven't even gotten started. But what she was really, really excited to celebrate was that she gave her son the gift of expression. He's got great ideas. He's so creative, and now he's got the ability to share them. And so she said it was like I was giving him the gift of joy for no other reason than just wanting to write about demigods. And she said, isn't that a fantastic thing that he's able to do in his free time, is to write for the pleasure of doing it about something that he loves, which was these demigods. And she said, I think it's a really wonderful thing. It was previously really heartbreaking to see his delay in execution. So even to have him copy a sentence that I had written before would take him up to 20 minutes. And then, like if we were actually asking him to write down his own ideas that he had to come up with, even for him to write a sentence or two would take up to 40 minutes. And she said, I'm not exaggerating. So there was something that was definitely blocking him. So to have this where like he's writing these 2 full paragraphs in this like 15-minute period in class is such a huge celebration. And she wanted to give that context because like, gosh, it was so different before. And so for him to be celebrating that I had so much fun writing about these demigods and all of this came out was just so big for her. His spelling massively improved, and we'll talk about the data for that in a minute. But she said, how he goes about his spelling is really, really good. So before he had this massive perfectionism, wasn't even willing to put things down on the paper because they wouldn't be right. Now he's willing to give it a go, and he has the confidence to go about it because he's got a strategy to do it. And she said, there's just been this foundational shift in his spelling. It's opened up doorways. He can be in the classroom and learn and try. Earlier this year, they were getting feedback from the teacher that he was a wanderer and that he was moving around the classroom, trying to get out, going to get a drink of water. But his mom said he's just this really good kid and he wants to be there. But this has really shifted his capacity to be a participant in the classroom. He had this massive gap where reading was really great and spelling and writing were really gruff. But and he was compensating so hard that he would be able to have about 10 real minutes of stamina before he would get fogged up and just need to wander around. But now she was celebrating that he picks up Percy Jackson books, which are fiction, and he's just demolished these books. So he read the second book in 3 to 4 days, meaning like he was reading for hours and hours and hours at a time, and he had the capacity to keep reading. So she said, fiction requires more of the brain to be engaged and embrace this magical world, and it's just been beautiful to see. And we now know what to buy him for his birthday and Christmas and all of these things because he just is like devouring these books. When they did get the neuropsych, there was an opportunity to diagnose him with ADHD and medicate him, but Mom said we weren't inclined to medicate him anyways. But my gut on that was right. So it wasn't really that he had all of this struggle with attention. It was that he was struggling so hard to concentrate. And so she said now he's in the normal spectrum for concentration. With his brain getting unlocked, you can see him as more and more settled. He has the ability to take in the world around him. We're seeing this also in mathematics, which has really reinforced what we've been seeing with his reading and writing. His working memory has improved significantly. She said it's more noticeable in his ability to strategize and figure things out. But it's really, really boosted his confidence in profound ways. It's this sense of, I've got this. And probably the coolest thing for those of you who are parents of children with dyslexia, he said, Mom, I have a superpower. His little brother says, I want dyslexia. And there is this sense of, I get to own this this is who I am. I get to tap into my power. And that's just so, so beautiful, this confidence and certainty. So just like such an amazing transformation for him in 4.5 months. So let's transition now. And I want to take a look at the data and show you what actually happened for Jarvis during this 4.5 month period. So when we started, we do a phonological awareness test, which is his brain's ability to really just hear sounds and be able to manipulate those. So he went from being 80% accurate to 99% accurate within that time. His reading score on the wide range achievement test 5 was actually very, very good to start. He started at the 96th percentile, but made statistically significant improvement in that as well and ended at the 99.9th percentile. And spelling went from the 14th percentile to the 58th, with another 6 of those being spelled phonetically correct, which would have put him at the 88th percentile. So massive, massive gains in spelling within that 4.5 month period. So just super, super awesome to see the opportunity, the power, the skill to help him to become unstoppable. So as we take a look at this data, again, he went from having 8 errors on this to just only 1. And then let's talk about the statistics. And if you're not really familiar with educational statistics, that's okay. I'll walk you through what this looks like. But what you see in front of you is the normal distribution curve. So right in the middle of this is the 50th percentile or average. So researchers have looked over the years to say, okay, when a kid grows in an academic year, about how much growth do they actually have? And so they've measured this and said, okay, so if you start first grade and you end first grade, the typical child is going to grow a 0.3 of a standard deviation. So all of these lines up here are standard deviations of change. So if we want to have a massive impact on the data, we want it to move as close to a full standard deviation as possible. So this is what a typical kid would grow in an entire year, start 4th grade, end 4th grade. If we want to have moderate statistical significance, meaning that this intervention had a moderate impact on the child's growth, it would be right here at this 0.5 of a standard deviation. If the intervention was what we would call statistically significant, meaning that we know with confidence that this had a positive statistical impact on the child's data, it would be a 0.8 or nearly to the standard deviation mark of growth within that interval. So let's take a look at this as it compares to Jarvis. So, sorry, this is not right, but these numbers are incorrect, sorry, but these are correct. So he started at the 96th percentile. So he was really doing very, very well as it pertained to his reading. But when we look at statistical significance and how much this shifts when you get way up here, to grow what an average kid would in an entire year at the 96th percentile would have moved him from this red dot to the yellow. If the intervention would have made statistical significance, it would have moved him here to this tan dot, but he blew the charts. He couldn't have possibly made it higher than what he did, which put him here at the 99.9th percentile, which is actually an entire standard deviation and then some of growth in his reading for a kid who was already really, really great at reading. So that was an awesome unintended consequence of being in the program. In addition, mom came in because he's really, really struggling with those writing issues, with spelling issues. So let's take a look at how he did there. So he started at the 14th percentile, which is here with this red dot. If he would have made statistically significant progress, it would have put him here at this orange dot here. This is what typical growth in an entire year would be at this yellow dot, but Jarvis actually went a standard deviation and a half. in 4.5 months with his spelling. And so one of the reasons that that is so, so powerful is oftentimes when parents are looking for a solution, they don't just want it to get a little bit better. Like you've got a major, major issue that you would like resolved in a major, major way. And so doing something that you know is going to have a statistically significant impact means that we know that the data is going to change in a statistically significant way, which it absolutely did for Jarvis in this area as well. So I think one of the things that is just really, really important to share in this journey is his mother. Let me just really quickly share this with you, and then I'll go back to share about her. But as we were just talking about with this statistically significant growth and making sure that you are investing in a program that is actually going to get you that growth, we are super proud at Retrain the Dyslexic Brain that we have this growth for all of our clients. So when you look at this, this is what an average kid would grow in an entire school year. This is what happens when we have an intervention that makes a child grow a statistically significant amount, which is what you really want when you're trying to find an intervention that's going to really move the needle for your kiddo. But this is our average growth for client graduates at Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. So it's double what statistically significant kids would have on average. And we're super, super proud of that. So we know that the system works. We know that when you help a child to actually gain neural activity in those areas that are deficient, it has a significant impact on their reading and spelling. And you can see that graduate over graduate over graduate. I mean, like we're literally doing this every other week with a different kid because of how often this happens. So it's just really, really important to know that number one, you can create activity in a kiddo that isn't currently using that. And when you hit the root causes, which is what is causing the brain to be having those struggles in the first place, and you actually help their brain to overcome that, you can create traction in a significant way in a very short interval of time, which we're just so, so proud of. So let me go back because this is super important to celebrate mama. It would be amiss if we did not celebrate our mamas on these calls because they are the other piece of this puzzle that makes this happen. So we have the strategy, we have the tools to help you to overcome this, but it is a partnership. When we work with clients, it is a partnership between mama bear or dad or grandma and us so that you are implementing these things for 10 to 15 minutes every single day for that 4-month interval. And it does require commitment and it requires work. And it means that you really, really have to be serious about seeing these results. But gosh darn it, these mamas are amazing. And Fiona is right up there as like top amazing mama. So what she said about this experience is that my son and I are deeply connected. And I see how much more impactful my state or well-being is on him. So by her being able to release some of that anxiety and tension that she was feeling around Jarvis and his struggles, it allowed them to connect more, which is just amazing. And she said, you know, sometimes we can use our own selves as a weapon against ourselves. I've lost my cool and I thought, gosh, this is the last thing that he needs. But instead, like I really used this as an opportunity to take care of myself. I had to separate from like what I needed in this moment to what he needs. I'm his mom and I needed to do what he needed me to be in that moment as his mom. But at the same time, like as a mom, I have to look out for myself because he can feel my energy. And if I'm out a little bit, he feels that. So she's just said, like, it was just such a beautiful transformation for the two of them, where they were able to get more and more deeply connected because of this amazing transformational experience that they had together. But she said, I never imagined that I would learn so much about myself throughout this process, my energy, the way that I was showing up, how much my anxiety or my expectations impacted him. But just through the mindset coaching and through all of the deep work that she did here, like not only did they get these amazing results, but they have this deeper spiritual, more fundamental level of growth that they were able to achieve as well, which I just think is amazing. So, if you want to dig more into educational statistics and you want to know more about this, there is a citation down here at the bottom for you to dig into. This is some of John Hattie's work, who has done studies of what effects on student achievement have had the most growth. But if you look, even some of these are like 1.3 standard deviations, and we're consistently doing like 1.8. So we are just super, super geeky proud about that. But more importantly, one of the reasons that we think that it's just so important to share this and to help people understand about the importance of closing the gap is when you stay in an intervention, or when you're maybe not even doing anything yet, where your child is just making minimal, if any, progress, and you are doing the same thing over and over and over again. It feels like a hamster wheel. There are consequences to that. And so one of the reasons why it's so critical to close the gap and to have an intervention that's actually going to move the needle in a big, big way is that it will improve academic performance. It will help increase the self-esteem and confidence of that kiddo. It will lead to better mental health. It will allow greater access to opportunities now and in the future. So, when you think about all of the classes and the courses and the jobs and the scholarships and just the opportunities that might be missed because I'm still struggling so much. I still don't believe in myself. I still don't have the skills that I need in order to be living my best life. Those things matter. And so when you have the ability to overcome this and you can actually start feeling amazing about yourself and your worth, oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. So I think it's just really, really important that you get to this moment where you realize that if you don't do this, you do miss opportunities. You have current and ongoing struggles. You miss future opportunities. There are other people in your family that suffer because of this. So I can't say enough about how important it is to really dive in and to help your child to overcome this. There is absolutely something that you can do about this. The brain is pliable. You can teach a child who has underactivity in those areas to start using those areas of the brain. And when you do, absolutely beautiful things happen for the children and for the family. So with that, I want to just tell you about a couple of ways that you can get some help if you might be needing it. So for those of you who are on the call today and you're saying, you know what, I think that I'm dealing with something, maybe you're in the case like Fiona was, where you recognize that there's a huge discrepancy between your child's intelligence and then like the way that they're reading or the way that they're spelling, it just doesn't make sense. I would invite you to join our Dyslexia Discovery Day. So we frequently are doing these days where we help you to dive in with norm reference data to find out for sure if dyslexia is really what you're dealing with. Because once you know that, once you can name it, then you have the information to then find a solution that's going to be the best for you. In addition, if you are out there listening and you're saying, oh my gosh, I have been doing the same thing over and over again for years, and I feel like I haven't been making any meaningful step forward, I would invite you to get on a complimentary call with a member of our team. So if you need that, just mention that in the comments or reach out to us at support@retrainthedyslexicbrain.com, and we will help you to get on the schedule to really determine if this is something that your child could benefit from. So I do think that our clients are amazing and we don't enroll people unless they are, but holy cow, this has got the potential to really transform you and your kiddo's life. So with that, I want to thank you so much for coming to these, and you have the ability to again join us in another 2 weeks when we share our next case study review.